our country is in very much deeper trouble than many care to admit. We are getting poorer individually. Our national debt is exploding. Societally, you only have to look at the grooming gangs. Abomination. What other word can I use?
Nigel Farage is ripping Starmer and his cronies apart, and they're terrified to the point of sabotaging Reform UK.
This is about a complete culture, a way of life, and somehow the Treasury and the government seem to have lost any sense or connection with where food comes from and with the English countryside. And I have to say, Westminster is just so out of touch.
The farmers have declared war on Starmer's dangerous policies, and Nigel Farage has stepped up.
That we do not think that elections being cancelled is the right thing 4 years on from a Conservative landslide. The two parties have colluded so that people can keep paid jobs for another couple of years.
Starmer and his Labour Party are plotting against Farage in an attempt to sabotage him, but it's backfiring horribly.
Oh, and then there's the money. So it's generally agreed that £9 billion we will pay for somebody to have something that is ours already. All right? And the Chagosian Prime Minister, the Mauritian Prime Minister, boasted last week in his parliament that the money, the payments, would now be inflation-linked.
Starmer and his cronies are set to betray the British public in the worst way possible, and Nigel Farage is furious.
If inflation runs at 3% for the next 99 years, and £90 million a year is linked to inflation, the total cost we will pay the Mauritian government for this is £52 billion. £52 billion, which is more than the entire defence budget this year.
Labour's idiotic plan will cost us an insane amount of money, and of course, the taxpayer will have to bear the burden.
If Reform form the next government, anybody here believe that Reform could? Thank you. They're still awake, that's good. If Reform form the next government, we will abrogate the treaty in the same way that Mauritius have done with our 1968 treaty. We will cease all payments.
Reform UK is gaining insane momentum, and Farage is getting bolder with his latest threats to Starmer.
Everyone knows we'll be using gas and oil up until at least 2050. So rather than importing it, why not produce our own oil and gas and have many, many well-paid jobs? We have closed down most of our chemical plants, most of our manufacturing, all of our aluminium smelting, nearly all of our primary steel production, and we import the goods from India and China in the name of saving the planet.
Starmer's idiotic Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, got shredded for her disastrous plans for the economy as well.
It is as if a collective madness has come upon the entire political class. A political class who in most cases have never had a job in their lives, are out of touch. And to think that a British manufacturer now has power costs that are 6 times that of his American counterpart shows you the sheer crass idiocy, moronitude, stupidity. I think moronitude's a new word, by the way, but anyway.
The madness of Starmerism is destroying Britain thanks to his out-of-touch and delusional politicians.
And I can't tell you how honoured I was to be in that room in Mar-a-Lago that night of the 5th of November when he won. I'm proud to call him a friend, and I think the start he's made with good common sense. I mean, who thinks that 6'3" men should compete in swimming events against women? I don't, he doesn't, and nor do you.
While Britain is burning, America is thriving, and America is making Starmer look like an embarrassing woke fool.
We've been giving money to India, Argentina, China, all sorts of countries, all sorts of crazy causes. We must cut the size of the public sector. We must cut the size of the administrative state. And we must understand that actually, if we're going to get ourselves out of trouble, we'll only do it through hard work, making money, getting tax revenue, without which we can't afford to have pensions, we can't afford to have health.
Labour's way out of their depth with their hidden agenda, but Farage is promising to turn things around.
And it seemed to me that family, community and country were the things that I cared about, were the things that the silent majority of Brits care about. And these were the things that inspired me to go back into the front line of politics. But you know something? All of those things are seriously threatened. Our country is in very much deeper trouble than many care to admit.
Stupid Starmer is so incredibly tone-deaf and delusional that he's ready to ruin our nation just to push his socialist agenda of failure. According to Farage, the very foundations of Britain are under threat, and unless we hold Labour accountable, things will only get worse. During the election, Keir Starmer, the so-called champion of the working class, kicked things off with the usual robotic rhetoric, parroting empty promises. He claimed to stand for change, but we all know what that really means: higher taxes, unchecked immigration, and the slow erosion of British values. Starmer wants to sell the illusion of competence, yet he's clobbering the working class. The farmers especially are being targeted, and Nigel Farage stepped up to join their recent protest.
This government has a big parliamentary majority, but 7 months in, how well's it going? They are doing very, very badly indeed, and they're scared out of their lives. They've got 100 Labour MPs that are representing rural or semi-rural constituencies. And from what I can see, Joe Public is getting behind the concept that the family farm should not be driven out of existence.
Nobody thought that Labour would have won such a landslide victory in the general elections, and yet here we are. Once again, the British public was unpleasantly surprised to find out that Starmer is even worse than anyone could have imagined. This shambolic government has brought Britain down to its knees within just 6 months of power, and things don't seem to be getting any better. On top of all that, Labour's in crisis mode. They're terrified, but no amount of damage control will get them out of this mess, especially since they're making an enemy out of the farmers.
This IHT, it isn't just the farms that it hits, it's family businesses as well. In fact, inheritance tax, when you think about it, it's on money that we paid tax on already. The whole thing's monstrous. So I think the country now is going to come together with lots of different groups, and let's just stand up and say no to death taxes, full stop. End death taxes. They're wrong, they're immoral at every level.
Even if you ignore the concept of inheritance tax, which is disgusting as it is, it doesn't make any logical sense why Rachel Reeves and Starmer think that it's a good idea to attack the farmers. The more you look into the situation, the more ridiculous it gets and the more stupid Starmer seems. How did they not expect a furious backlash from the public over such treachery? Now, communities are uniting and protests are already rallying to demand concessions or Starmer's resignation. The very idea that the government can tax what someone inherits from their dead parents is nothing short of appalling, and Farage is pushing back against it.
They just want lots of land, because they're planning for another 5 million people to come into the country in the next few years. They want to cover tens of thousands of grade 1 agricultural land in places like Lincolnshire with solar panels. Could it be there is an even deeper, more sinister agenda behind what they're doing? Either way, what they're doing is wrong.
In a move that shocked everyone, Nigel Farage hinted that the Labour Party has a much more sinister agenda behind the scenes that they're relentlessly pushing. Of course, we've all heard how socialistic this government already is, and people are really starting to believe that Starmer is doing some shady stuff behind the scenes. Regardless of what their intentions are, the move to destroy farmlands is something that the Labour Party will regret for years to come, as the public will not forgive them for this betrayal.
So let's get the whole country behind this campaign, apart, of course, from the political class in Westminster, who now have no connection or no understanding of what our rural communities are, what they represent. Maybe you're not diverse enough. Maybe that's what it is.
Britain is more united than you might think. The mainstream media is trying to downplay just how fed up the public is with this government, but the polls speak for themselves. Labour is losing support at a rapid pace and Starmer's approval ratings are in the gutter. Despite that, Sir Keir Starmer is simply too arrogant and tone deaf to listen to what the public is complaining about. The liberal elites are way too disconnected with the struggles of an average Brit, and it shows. Farage, on the other hand, is making some serious threats and promises.
DEI is dying in America, and very soon it's going to die here too, and we'll start judging people on who they are, not what they are, and wouldn't that be a huge improvement? So I promise that I will go on with my colleagues, backing your campaigns here and around the country.
Diversity and the rest of the woke virus has plagued the Western world for years now. It's a war on competence and it's weakening our institutions. Donald Trump gets it, and that is exactly why he has axed all diversity and inclusion nonsense from America. Moving forward, America has made a return to common sense, and Farage is promising to do the same in Britain. Armed with pledges like these, Nigel Farage and Reform UK might have a genuine shot at winning the next election. Just look at the level of support he's already getting.
No, they're defiant. I mean, they feel, and some of these families have had farms for hundreds of years, they feel directly threatened by these proposed tax changes, and they're going to stand up and they're going to fight. And they're doing it here. We're in North London this morning, but this is beginning to happen all over the country.
It's safe to say that Britain is waking up and they're regretting voting for Keir Starmer and his merry band of idiots. The Labour Party has done horribly, and it looks like they won't be winning another election anytime soon. The farmers and the pensioners are seething at the betrayals they're facing. Starmer massively underestimated just how firm the working class Brits are, and they're not going to stop protesting until he flip-flops on these massive blunders. The inheritance tax hikes were a mistake, and it's about time the Labour admits it.
For Labour, it poses a real headache because they've got about 100 members of Parliament representing rural constituencies, in many cases for the first time. And I think if this farming campaign keeps up with its level of persistence, stays peaceful, which is very, very important, I think they can win some big concessions from the government.
Labour's problems don't just end with the backlash, and they know it. 100 of Labour's seats in Parliament are from rural communities. These very farmers helped Starmer to get into power, and that has disastrous implications. Every single Labour member of Parliament is panicking right now, and rightfully so. Starmer is destroying the Labour Party from within, and they're looking at another few decades of losing the elections. They've lost all credibility and support, as nobody believes a single word that comes out of their mouths anymore.
And that whilst farms, with their buildings and land, may have a relatively high asset value, their incomes are pretty pitiful. In fact, many farming families living on pretty much minimum wage or less, these are not rich people. These are hard-working people. In previous years, they've had better times, but right now, life is tough. Food prices are low, the supermarkets have squeezed them. These are not wealthy people at all.
Just think about it logically. Is there any rational justification behind what the Labour Party is doing? The obvious answer for anyone with an ounce of common sense is a resounding no. These farmers are not rich by any stretch of the imagination, and there's no way that they can afford to pay such outrageous taxes without being forced to sell their farmlands. This matter doesn't just affect the farmers, it will ruin the Britain food supply as well.
This is about more than just where they live. This is about a complete culture, a way of life, and somehow the Treasury and the government seem to have lost any sense or connection with where food comes from and with the English countryside. And I have to say, Westminster is just so out of touch.
Nigel Farage is on fire as he's continuously firing shots at Starmer and his stupid government that seems intent on making life miserable for British citizens. Labour seems to be living in a socialist fantasy land, and their actions are directly clobbering the Brits. Starmer wants stronger communities while championing woke policies that divide the nation. He wants a better Britain, yet his party has consistently worked against British interests at every turn. His leadership isn't about fixing Britain, it's about centralising power in Labour's hands.
I couldn't agree more with Nigel about death taxes. They are so pernicious. In my family, we've just sold my mother's little flat in central London that she bought in the 1960s. Right. And it was amazing to see how much that was bought for back then, £6,000.
Wow.
The whole thing has just basically been sold to donate to this government, which really sticks in the throat given how they squander taxpayers' money.
Britain has completely changed over the years, and our useless politicians are to blame for it. The cost of living has skyrocketed while the standards of life in Britain are plummeting at the same time. Nigel Farage is spot on about the death taxes that this government is so shamelessly imposing on the public, and countless people are backing him up. The increasing support for Farage is starting to haunt Starmer as he runs scared. Even other countries are proving to be more sensible than this socialist nonsense. Starmer needs to get a grip and stop behaving like a third world dictator. Instead of learning from his mistakes, he's busy sabotaging Farage in a manner so disgusting that you won't believe it.
And in New Zealand and Australia, they scrapped it for the very reason that these farmers are protesting about, because its impact is to break up family farms. So they very quickly realised in Australia and New Zealand that if you impose these death duties on farmers and the children who inherit farmland, very quickly your production system is going to take a big hammering.
Common sense hasn't completely died out yet, as many countries are completely abolishing inheritance taxes. Meanwhile, Labour's doing the exact opposite by making life miserable for the farming community. Other nations realize the importance of producing food locally, and it's working out well for them as their economies are doing much better than ours. All that Rachel Reeves and Starmer are doing is promising us fantasies while gaslighting the entire nation into believing that there's nothing wrong going on. The worst of it all is that this hike in inheritance taxes isn't even necessary.
It just has any number of really sort of pointless side effects. You know, it's not as if this is going to raise a huge amount of money.
No.
You know, we talk about vast sums being sent to Mauritius for the Chagos Islands, you know, absolutely dwarfing any receipts from this completely ill-conceived farm inheritance tax levy.
A policy that isn't bringing any real revenue and instead making the economy worse, as we'll have to rely on imported food, is not a good policy by any definition whatsoever. Despite that, Labour seems committed to proving just how hypocritical and incompetent they are. Make no mistake, the amount of taxpayer money this government is wasting on useless policies and illegal immigrants is more than enough to fix our economy if they had their priorities straight. Sadly, Starmer's too busy being insecure as he doesn't even trust his own cronies anymore.
And I think Angela Rayner is formidable. I really do. I think she's an absolute firebrand. She's a kind of contemporary John Prescott. I think she's got tremendous spirit. I think she adds to the gaiety of the nation, but she is also, you know, a serious political operator. And as such, she's a threat to boring old Keir. I mean, you know, I won't like a single one of Angela Rayner's ideas or policies, but somehow I'd still prefer her to be in charge than Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
Angela Rayner is rising through the ranks, and at this point, many people prefer her over the dull and soulless Starmer. Labour's on the brink of collapse, and there's countless internal tears that are adding up. We might be seeing a rebellion as Angela Rayner might end up betraying Starmer. There's countless rumours flying around, but one thing is for sure, Starmer is terrified as he faces threats from all sides. Even now, he's doing everything he possibly can to try and stop Nigel Farage, and let's just say Farage isn't very happy about it.
Labour, Tory, there is something of a difference, a change in the political weather, if you may. So I'm standing here today to say we think it is completely outrageous. In fact, despite the fact we're a very happy, optimistic, forward-looking party, we are blimmin' angry this afternoon that 5.5 million people in this country are being denied their vote on May the 1st this year.
According to Nigel Farage, there's a huge change happening in British politics, and he might be spot on about it. The British public seems to be done with the constant back and forth between the Labour Party and the Tories. All we've seen is a constant decline in Britain's prosperity, and Nigel Farage is promising to turn that around. However, the immature Starmer knows he can't win this fight and has cancelled the local elections in Labour's latest, most shameful betrayal.
The elections are cancelled. Now, I thought that only dictators cancelled elections, but no, this is the connivance of a now terrified Labour Party, and boy, didn't we see that today at Prime Minister's questions. And I was being shouted down from all sides. It was almost like old days in the European Parliament.
Keir Starmer is not only betraying the British public, he's betraying democracy, a core value of our nation. In behaving like a dictator, Starmer is showing to the world just how weak and insecure he is. Think about it. Why isn't he trying to undo his mistakes and regain the trust of the British public? Instead, he's desperately trying to hold onto power while continuing with his idiotic agenda.
How long the cancellations last, whether it's 1 year or 2 years or more, we don't know. What we do know is that the reorganisation of local government is going to take up to 3 years to complete. And given that a term for a county councillor is 4 years, there is absolutely no justification for cancelling the elections of 5.5 million people other than the cowardice of the existing political class, and that's what we've launched.
Here's the kicker that confirms that Labour only did this to sabotage Farage. Starmer tried to gaslight the public by saying that they're reorganising the local government and that's why they're cancelling the election. However, the truth is that the reorganisation process will take years, so why are Starmer and Angela Rayner cancelling the elections now? Isn't it convenient that they're doing this right when Nigel Farage is expected to win?
Let it commence, but I'll make it very, very clear that we do not think that elections being cancelled is the right thing 4 years on from a Conservative landslide. The two parties have colluded so that people can keep paid jobs for another couple of years. It's wrong at every level, and I certainly know that in the counties affected, the vast majority of people will agree with us. Thank you.
The political elites feel so threatened by Farage and Reform UK that they're scheming together to try and stop him. Once they knew that they can't win fairly, they resorted to such disgusting and disgraceful tactics. Little did they know that this one move will end up backfiring horribly for them, as they've only given more ammunition to Farage as he lets out a scathing rant.
I've got severe reservations about small, more rural district councils being swallowed up by unitaries that'll be governed by the bigger towns or bigger cities. Then yes, absolutely, it is ludicrous that we should extend the term, and in many cases on county councils, particularly cabinet, people who are quite well paid from the public purse. It is absolutely ludicrous that we don't take a temperature test of where public opinion is and have an open debate and consultation about local government. I mean, you know.
Nobody asked us if we wanted this reorganisation of the local councils, and nobody bothered to question if it is a good idea to begin with. Make no mistake, Starmer and Labour seem blinded by power, and this might be another one of their desperate moves to stay in power. However, the public is waking up, as Farage isn't the only one angry about this. Brits are furious and they're demanding accountability from the government. Petitions are flying around and you can join them by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.